Hey, visibility hackers, welcome back. Today we're talking about how to choose the right guests for your show, your audience, and your movement. I want you to think about a podcast or a live show or even a talk show that you really enjoy. I want you to think about the types of guests that they have. And then I want you to compare it to my old show where I just picked whatever guest I could find. Some people it was their very first interview ever, and others were actually well-known people in the industry. Okay, so here's the difference. People who have my old show's mentality, they're just bringing on guests for the sake of bringing on guests, which is what we call content for the sake of content. We know that doesn't work very well. But when you pick the right guests, the right mix of celebrities or industry experts or whatnot, that is what's going to set your show apart. It's going to give your show, your audience, a meaning to go to your show rather than any other show, because you're bringing a curated selection of experts and stories and motivation and inspiration to your audience. That also positions you as the thought leader and the expert in your particular style, your particular movement. So here's the thing. You have two different options. You can either select niche guests or you can select big popular names in your industry. This also works one-on-one interviews, panel discussions, the whole thing. Same mindset applies, same questions apply. So we're going to summarize this real quick. We have on one hand the niche experts, and on the other hand we have popular figures. My mind is still on Funnel Hacking Live, so let's use marketing world in the digital marketing space as our example here. So a niche expert or a niche guest would be someone like Damon Burton. He's not the biggest name if you look internationally, but he's really well known in his niche. He does SEO stuff. He's brilliant. Also, FYI, go check out our Friday Night Live episode where we got all the juicy details from him. I'll link that up in the card and I'll link it down in the description. So because he has a very deep knowledge of a specific subject, he becomes one of our niche experts. He can bring a very specific set of information to our audience. Fantastic. The information doesn't apply to everyone. It's not going to attract everyone, but it's going to serve incredible value to our target audience. On the other hand, we can have an industry expert or a public figure. So in that case, if we're looking at the same example, we would have someone like a Russell Brunson who might be recognized in multiple industries. He might be recognized internationally, and he has a much wider capture area or capture audience. So we have these two diametrically opposed plans or strategies for having guests on our show. But here's the thing. It's not an either-or option. You can and should have a mix of both. So let's talk about pros and cons of each of these. Let's talk about the pros of niche experts. So first and foremost, they have a very deep knowledge of the subject that they talk about. This serves great value. Also, they tend to give really great authentic discussions. Really laid back, kind of let me pick your brain, two friends who happen to be really smart people having a conversation. That's the kind of stuff you get. That's the kind of quality of interview you get, which is great. Don't take casual as a bad thing or as a point against it. Casual can actually be the tone that brings the best kind of conversations. The other great thing about niche experts is they are most likely to have a dedicated audience who's interested in seeing that expert show up on different platforms, on different shows, different podcasts, etc., etc. So that means they're most likely going to start watching your show. And if you do it right, they will stay watching other episodes, even episodes that don't involve their particular expert. Now, here's the thing. There are cons to both types of experts. So let's talk about the cons of having a niche expert. Yes, they have a dedicated following, But that also means that there's a bit of a trade-off when we talk about the size of their audience. They tend to have smaller audiences, but still more dedicated audiences. So in my eyes, that's a great thing to have. Another thing is that they tend to have less media training. They're a little less polished. They might not have the best sound bites or things like that. Might take a little bit more work to get great conversation out of them, but when it happens, it is beautiful. I have absolutely had niche guests that just bombed, absolutely bombed. For example, I worked with someone who is very skilled in a very technical area, and they weren't helping me speak to our target audience, which was people who were just getting over that initial hump, that initial fear of the technology they need in order to create their content. And this person chose to use industry jargon constantly and really talk over their heads as a way of helping to what they thought was establishing their own authority and credibility. But what it ended up doing was creating this really sour episode that felt really awkward. It had the worst ratings of all of the episodes on the show, and we didn't continue that relationship with that expert after because it wasn't fitting our movement. It wasn't fitting our audience. It was speaking to a very different group of people. But let's talk about having popular figures on your show, because that, I know, is very exciting. And I know a lot of us, when we start out our shows and we start out our journeys of content, we have these big guests in mind that we want to bring onto our show, but we really don't know how to make that happen. Don't worry, we got content this week or this section or this month coming out on the YouTube channel all about how to pick the right guests, how to reach out to them. We got extra resources for you and all of that. Join us in the visibility hacking community, but let's keep talking about the positives that can come from having these big name popular figures. First and foremost, instant recognition, instant credibility. You bring a large name on that has their own history, their own resume of credibility, their own pre-established authority. All of that comes instantly to you when they become a guest on your show. Because we know that public figures have the ability, we all have the ability, but they really get to flex that muscle of selecting which shows they choose to participate in and which shows they choose not to participate in. So if they choose to be on your show, fantastic. Your credibility, instant. Other cool thing is that they are more likely when they are on your show to boost your views and to boost your audience count, simply because they are moving their following over who are interested in seeing them, not necessarily interested in seeing you. What's also kind of cool is, depending on the figure that you bring on, you could have a viral moment similar to the Joe Rogan experience. If you have someone like an Elon Musk doing something so out of the box, it might bring attention to your show simply because you were the stage in which the event happened. It's kind of cool. But of course, nothing is perfect. Nothing has just great things in its corner. There are also cons to having public figures as guests on your show. One of those is similar to having those niche experts. They might actually overshadow you as the host. They might take the reins and run. They might turn it into a completely different format. They might change so many things that it starts to feel different to your audience, and it feels kind of weird. Another unfortunate thing that can happen with public figures is that you tend to have talking points that are agreed upon earlier, so you end up having more surface level conversation, not as much opportunity for that real deep, authentic conversation. And obvious, the one most of us have encountered is either they are inaccessible, like completely inaccessible, or they demand high fees to speak on your show and provide visibility to their movement. Yeah, so I stay away from any kind of guests who asked for a fee to have them on my show. I don't think that leads to the conversations I want. And if it's someone who I still have in my Dream 100, someone who I'm still trying to pursue, I'll look for other avenues in order to build that relationship a little bit more, so that maybe being on my show is now seen as providing value for those figures. This is the strategy Catherine Jones used to get on stage at Funnel Hack Hacking Live, the first time, the second time, and every time after that. So creating a balanced strategy that utilizes both these niche experts and these popular figures will be a wonderful start for your show. Whether you're doing a podcast or a live show or just a regular stream of content, mixing it up, having deeper conversations and more surface level conversations, and all of those makes a great mix, kind of like trail mix, all of the favorite parts together, and you get to grab them by handfuls. Okay, maybe that analogy doesn't work so well, but whatever. So how do you know what to have or who to have on what episode and what the mix should be? Well, think about the goal of your episode. Is it educational? Is it entertaining? Are you trying to speak about a certain topic that is trending or is popular or needs a deeper discussion? What is the goal of your show in that episode? Other thing, obviously, to consider is your audience. What are their preferences? What do they want to hear? And who do they want to hear from? Literally ask your people. Send out a little ask campaign in email or in a social post and ask them, what kind of guests do you want to see on the show? What kind of topics do you want to see on the show? Obviously, if they're going to suggest options, these are options that they are more likely to tune into. Listen to your audience, serve your audience first. Any interview needs to have a pre-interview process. You need to warm up your guest. Even if it's your best friend on your show, you still need to go through a pre-interview process. It can be as simple as a conversation right before you press record, but get on the same page. Make sure they know how long the interview is going to be so we know if we want to tell longer stories or we should be telling short stories. Is your episode a 3-hour conversation episode, or are we trying to get really key sound bites? Let your guests know about your audience. What are they looking for? What kind of message are we trying to get out of this conversation? Of course, you need to ask your guest if there's any topics you should steer away from or topics you really want to steer towards. It's the same process for niche experts as well as popular figures. How much detail you provide in each of those different categories will depend on the guest themselves. This is also a great way to make sure you can pronounce people's names and they can pronounce yours. Just saying. So before we go, I just have to reiterate the most important part here is that the fact that there is no right or wrong answer in this question, in this debate of niche guests versus popular guests. The right mix depends on your audience, your show, your message, mission, and movement. So I hope that makes you feel empowered that you have the ability to create that right mix, to get your message out, to bring that message through your guests. And remember, social media, always changing. The trends, always moving. But one thing that's not changing is that I genuinely want to know how this process is going for you. So leave us your thoughts, your stories, your experiences down in the comments. Do not forget to join us on the Visibility Hacker Radio or Visibility Hacking Radio, our podcast. We got some great tips, tricks, strategies for you coming out this week, as well as we have our brand new workbook for this week. We have so much great content for you. So make sure you subscribe over here. Join us in the Facebook group. I'll see you on the live shows. Join us for book club. Oh, I could go on and on. Remember, I love you. Be excellent to each other.